Hey Synthwaver, Alonzo here. In this video, I'm going to analyze the bass patterns of 8 tracks from the super popular band The Midnight and discuss how you can reapply them in your own tracks. Get your free account at synthwavedojo.com today and watch my videos neatly organized and without ads. Let's do this. For this video, I analyzed 8 tracks. And these tracks collectively have over 152 million plays on Spotify alone. So this is very big, the number of plays that The Midnight has. And the tracks that I analyzed were Los Angeles, Sunset, The Comeback Kid, Gloria, Jason, Days of Thunder, Vampires, and The Equalizer. And most of these are, I would say, from the first 2 or 3 albums and works by The Midnight, not so recent. And in any case, some of the findings by looking at the bass patterns of these tracks were that 75% or 6 tracks, the bass lines play only root notes in a continuous 8th note pattern. Very interesting. 12.5% or 1 track out of the 8, the bass pattern plays root notes, but it uses sustained notes following the chord changes. And 1 track or 12.5%, it has a bass line that plays root notes with some passing tones, but in a continuous 16th note pattern, what we would consider rolling 16ths. And my assumption is that they used 16th notes in this case because the tempo of this track is very slow, or slower, 82 BPM, whereas all the other tracks that I looked into, they went from 100 BPM all the way up to 140 and 160, which is pretty fast for synthwave. Great, so let's get down into it. This is the drum pattern that I came up with for this video. Something very simple. Kick on the 1 and 3, snare playing on the 2 and 4, and hi-hats playing 8th notes. Standard stuff, super easy. The first pattern we're going to look into is continuous 8th notes playing the root note of the chords. This pattern is used by Los Angeles, Sunset, Days of Thunder, The Comeback Kid, Jason, and Gloria. And here's how it sounds. This is a very popular pattern because it supports the music very well without overwhelming it. I would go as far to say that 8th notes is a great choice for almost all tempos between 100 and I would say 160 BPM, and you can't go wrong if you choose this kind of pattern. And it's very simple as you see the MIDI in front of you. Just 8th notes, set your grid to 8th notes, for example like so, and then just enter the notes following your chord progression, right? Easy peasy. And even though this is super simple to do, don't be deceived and try to or have your first approach create a super complex bass line. Again, think that this kind of bass line, just different chords, of course, and possibly different changes, different places where the chords are changing. The Midnight have used it on at least 6 of the 8 tracks that I analyzed. Remember, total of 152 million views, so simple does it. Great. That's our first pattern. Super simple, 8th notes playing a continuous pattern. Our second kind of bass line is what I call a sustained bass bass line. Vampires uses this, and simply, it's just 1 note held throughout the duration of the chords, whether that's an entire bar or half a bar or 2 beats. Instead of playing continuous 8th notes, it's just 1 note sustained, like this. Very easy. Of course, for this kind of pattern to work, you need a bass patch that has sustain, whereas for an 8th note or 16th note bass line, you want a patch that's more plucky, like so. In any case, this video is not so much about the sound design. I'll get into that in later videos, but at least I'm just throwing it out there just for you to start making up your mind and getting a flavor for these sounds and what works in the different situations. So once again, sustained bass, very simple, just one note, sustained throughout the duration of the chord. There we go. Easy peasy. That was Vampires. And our final bass pattern for today is a continuous stream of 16th notes, what you would call rolling bass line or rolling 16ths. In this case, the tempo is 82 BPM, so I'm going to set it like that. And it's just, as the name suggests, 16th notes. You would create a pattern like this, set your grid to 16th notes, and enter the notes and change when the chords change. Easy peasy stuff. This is how the equalizer 16th note rolling bass pattern sounds like. Again, very simple stuff. And you also want a bass pattern, a bass patch that is very choppy, staccato, that has a lot of attack. Great. When you play 16th notes and 8th notes in your bass line, depending on how the patch is programmed, sometimes it happens that even though you're programming a 16th note pattern like so, you hear only one long sustained note. If that's the case, it may have to do with the patch being set up as legato as opposed to mono or retriggered notes. If that's happening to you, you simply shorten the notes to get that plucky sound that you were going for. And in the case of this patch, how it's programmed, you hear that I can make this super staccato, and I think it's not going to change at all. Oh yeah, in this case, it does change. So that's also another option or another thing you have to play with, is shortening the notes and getting just a different kind of vibe. Very choppy and short, certainly usable. Let's do the same thing with the 8th notes from here. But let's set this back to 115. We can shorten these notes. And for this, what I'm doing is disabling snap to grid so I can shorten them as much as I like, just a little bit or a lot, without worrying about being aligned on the grid, without that being a limitation. It does make a difference in this patch. And again, that's another color that you can play with. Maybe during the intro, you have the bass line with the notes of a certain length, let's say with the full length, but during the chorus or during the verse or the breakdown, you make the notes shorter. So that's another way to get more mileage out of your bass pattern, is by playing with the length of the notes. Great. Let's see. This was a very quick video and very simple, but what can we take away from all of this? All right. My first bullet point is that continuous 8th notes, kind of like I just mentioned a few minutes ago, will work for most tracks with a mid to high tempo, let's say from 100 to 160 BPM. Certainly, you could try 8th notes at 80 or 70 and see how you like it. Continuous 16th notes work very well for slow and mid tempos, between 60 to 100. I think you can still use a rolling bass line at 120. Over that, it tends to get a little overwhelming. Let's listen to that. For example, this is a rolling 16th at 120. It can start get a little crazy, and 130, it's a little overwhelming, so you got to be careful with that. Then you can optionally spice up your patterns using passing tones or other chord tones. For example, thirds, fifths, and sevenths. I didn't go into any of this on this video. I have another video called Beyond Root Bass, where I touch upon the subject of using the thirds, fifths, and sevenths in your patterns. Basically, just to do something quick, is that the chord here is D minor, and we're only playing D. However, some of these notes could play the third, the fifth, or the seventh of the chord, or even some other note of the scale that's not part of this chord. That would be called a passing tone. For example, let's see, this is in D minor. Okay, so F, G, C, F, C, G, and D. For example, if we were to use G, this is a non-chord tone that belongs to the scale. All right, enough of that. Then, consider using sustained notes when you want a fuller, fatter sound in the bass. Definitely the texture, for example, at 115 BPM in the case of Vampires. Either eighth notes, a sustained note. Let me set this back to where it was. Okay, as I was saying, for Vampires, either rolling 16ths, continuous eighth notes, or sustained bass would work. Sounds good. Rolling 16ths. Sounds good. But the Midnight chose a sustained bass approach. And it works well. And finally, keep it simple. Simple works best and can get you very far. Again, 8 tracks, 75% use a super simple, you would say basic or even beginner or amateur 8th note pattern that anyone can program. And all of these tracks cumulatively have over 152 million plays on Spotify. So at least what this tells me is that you can make music that's very simple and still connect with a lot of people out there if you then focus on how to deliver that emotion and construct a track or a song that really takes the listener on a journey. So it's not so much about the notes and not so much about creating patterns that are super complex or that no one has ever heard before. It's about making certain things simple to give way for others to be more complex or have more impact, right? So your first approach, try to keep things super simple and make them more complex if you need to, but always start simple, and definitely this can pay out very handsomely. All right, my friends, hope you found this useful. See you in the next one. Ciao.